Good morning. It's July 12th, 2022, Tuesday. Welcome to Triggered. Yes, we're well into Stampede week now. Everybody else with their Western clothing is out and dressed such and wearing their jeans and hats. Unfortunately, that is one area where I'm a bad Albertan. Been born and raised in Alberta, but I just can't learn to like country music or wear Western clothes. Just can't make myself do it. So I'm in the usual dress code with the jacket and tie on for this. But everybody else is out enjoying themselves. The weather's supposed to, well, it's already turning nice and hot, so everybody can bake out on the midway and drink those overpriced pops and beers and have a good time. We're due for it anyways, though. I mean, it's the first full Stampede in years, thanks to the pandemic panic over the last while. So we're going to have probably a couple of check-ins. We'll be doing it tomorrow as well from the Midway live with some folks out there, though. It is good to get out there and have a good time. It is a Calgary tradition, whether it's the parties in the bars or down on the Stampede grounds themselves. So let's see what else we got going on while everybody else comes in there and checks in. I see Sean from 300 kilometers north Cowtown, apparently, and Tammy McLean from Fort Vermilion. That's a heck of a lot farther north than that as well. I remember working, well, kind of halfway between Red Earth Creek in there for some time. That's some pretty isolated turf, and she's saying they had a residential school in their community as well. We'll talk more about those. That's one of the subjects coming up today, Debbie and Tabor. So yeah, keep those comments coming, guys. It's a live show. That's what I appreciate. I like seeing people coming in, letting me know I'm not talking into the middle of nowhere. And again, interact with each other. Send comments my way. Send them to the guests. Talk with each other. Just keep it a little bit civil, though, guys. It's, we can take it seriously without fighting with each other. All right, what are the two big observations for today? We've got Cow Appreciation Day. This is the day to get out there and hug your cow, hug your neighbor's cow. Get out of the city, find a cow, give it a hug. This is the day to appreciate it. Then you eat it. That's how you really want to appreciate it in the long run. But in the short run, make them happy. Make them know they're appreciated. Make them know their sacrifice is well worth it. So we got Samantha in Grand Prairie saying hi, and Jason in Pigeon Lake. You guys got cattle all over the place. Patricia in Chauvin. Yeah, I did a lot of work out there south of Provost. Again, you got cattle. So appreciate those cows. And I guess there's the dairy products you can appreciate out of them as well. This is the day to recognize those things. And then, man, meat's getting expensive anyway. It's also Etch-a-Sketch Day. I don't know how they come up with these things, but hey, everybody of a certain age group, and I'm among those, remembers those things. Oh, I used to fight with my brother and beat him over the head with it, as we'd battle over who gets the chance to scrawl piss poor drawings on a weird two-dial thing. The days before electric and video sorts of games. It was a creative sort of thing. Those were a huge toy in maybe the 60s. I don't know. They were in the 70s when I was a kid. This is the day we have our observation of the importance of Etch-a-Sketch Day and the influence it had on our lives. All right. I got a couple of guests. We're going to get on to some serious issues, of course, and on to all that. Certainly my rant is going to be a bit today. Michelle Stirling is going to come on, though, with the Friends of Science. And they've really broken down and put out releases on Calgary's insane, and I always use that word when I talk about it, Calgary's insane $87 billion climate strategy. Yeah, that's with a B. It's not a typo. That's what one city has dedicated, saying they're going to spend to try and fight climate change. Brilliant. So Michelle always adds good insight into all those things. And Jay Hill's going to come in the studio. We're going to talk about a few federal issues and a number of things. But, Jay was the interim leader of the Maverick Party for quite some time. Tamara Lich was on the board of the Maverick Party. They have, the usual lunatics have been shooting at Tamara and others just for her having been involved with that party. The party's not extreme by any means, but it's good I want to talk to somebody about Tamara's character. I mean, I've talked to Tamara on the phone, I've emailed, but I can't pretend to be somebody who knows her well. Jay does know her well, and she's being demonized. She's literally locked up. She's a political prisoner. So we get some firsthand discussion from people who know her and realize just how odious this whole affair is. All right. Speaking of odious affairs, I'm going to talk about residential schools. And, the case is never closed and discussion is always allowed. It has to be. And that statement can be applied to pretty much any issue. But I'm going to talk about today the residential school grave sites. I mean, there's the revelation of the discovery of possibly over 200 unmarked graves at the site of a former Kamloops residential school. And it rocked the nation. I mean, our flags were kept at half-mast for almost half a year. Apologies came fast and furious from the government, and activists raged. The other consequence of the discovery was a flood of misinformation and exaggeration of what actually happened in residential schools. Unfounded anecdotes of abuses as horrific and absurd as the purposeful murder and cremation of babies were shared, and they're taken as fact. They weren't questioned because you would be shouted down. It was assumed that every single person who attended a residential school was there by force and they were abused, and that's just not true. To question any allegations would, and still leads, though, to allegations of racism and attempted cancellation by the media and the internet mob. This most recently happened when the Fort Times, a newspaper in Saskatchewan, ran a column by former Judge Brian Geisbrecht, where he pointed out that not a single body has been confirmed yet at that site in Kamloops. Similar radar findings have indicated potential graves at a spot in Nova Scotia, Charles Camsell Hospital in Alberta, Cooper Island, BC, and Brantford, Ontario. Radar showed similar things underground, but when excavations were conducted, there were no bodies actually found. It doesn't mean there aren't burials at the Kamloops site. It does mean, though, we can't be sure what's going on until they're exhumed. We can't assume. Now, Geisbrecht also said that 832 people died at residential schools, mainly from tuberculosis, when they had already had it when they enrolled in the school. Most would have died if they'd stayed at their homes as well. And I mean, if you don't believe that, that's fine. Let's study it, though. Let's discuss it. Like, these deaths are being attributed wrongly, and we should be allowed to discuss this. The next assumption being taken is as fact is that there are bodies, and that those bodies are of children from the residential schools. I mean, there was one site excavated in Eastern Canada, but then they found it actually carried the remains of Irish settlers. Unmarked and forgotten cemeteries aren't exclusive to any race or group. The term mass graves, that's another one. It's constantly being used by activists. There's been yet to be a single mass grave found. Using the term mass graves implies large holes where a number of bodies were dumped, and that never happened in Canada. While activists are trying to draw parallels, and that's what they're doing, between the Holocaust of World War II and with what happened to residential schools. They do so by loosely using the term genocide and labeling every single native who ever attended a residential school as a survivor. 6 million Jews were purposely slaughtered factory-style in World War II. Well over 500,000 Tutsis were exterminated in Rwanda during their civil war. In Canada, fewer than 150,000 students even attended residential schools over the period of 100 years. And yeah, some died while they're in those schools, but there was no purposeful effort to kill them. There was no genocide. And labeling every student as a survivor is an exaggeration. Records were meticulously kept by organizations managing the schools. They did so to ensure they got funding. It wasn't some altruistic thing. They wanted to get paid for those kids. They recorded every student entering and leaving those schools. There was no mass of missing children. None vanished without record while attending the schools. A myth has been perpetuated that thousands disappeared. That simply isn't true, and we need to be able to point that out. Are there graves of children at some former residential school sites? It only stands to reason that there would be. Those schools were harsh places 100 years ago. They were underfunded, and the West was barely developed. Many children died in the early to mid-20th century of the Spanish flu, polio, tuberculosis, and this was both native and non-native kids alike. Students at residential schools were particularly vulnerable, as they had little natural immunity to those diseases. They were not always fed balanced nutritional diets, and they lived in crowded quarters that lent themselves to disease transmission. It was wrong to put kids in that situation and pack them into those schools, but let's not allow these claims of genocide to stand unquestioned and unfounded, because they're unfounded. Don't let them stand that way. It wasn't easy to transport the remains of a person a century ago. Bodies were often buried close to the place of death as a means of practicality, and they were usually marked with nothing more than a wooden cross. Over a century, those crosses decayed and disappeared. The cemeteries were forgotten. It wasn't a purposeful effort to hide them, though. There were abuses and there were tragedies in those schools, and we should investigate and find out what they're about. Any abusers still alive today, and if their abuse can be proven, they should be charged. We need to critically study what happened in those residential schools, but we won't be able to if the debate is shouted down and unfounded allegations remain unquestioned. How can we achieve closure and final reconciliation if we don't have all the facts? I fear that many activists and lawyers don't want to see closure or reconciliation, though, because they profit greatly off the cash settlements and ongoing anger. They perpetuate myths and keep the anger inflamed for their own benefit. Well, the discussion is never closed, and we're going to carry it on. That's what's got me going today. And yes, it's sad. Like I said, I'm not saying there wasn't abuse. I'm not saying it was a good idea to have those schools. But we've got to get down to the facts and what really was behind them and stop letting the exaggerations and the myths dominate the story. And we got to stop shutting people down for trying to just ask questions on the issue. All right. Let's bring in our news editor, Dave Naylor, and see what else is happening out in the great wide world today. Hey, Dave, how's it going?
It's going well, Cory. As you can see, I'm also wearing my standard Western gear. James, our operations guy, and I were at a Stampede event last night, and in a crowd of 200 people, we were the only ones in suits. So I've told Derek that he better get us some Western gear for next year, some nice Western standard shirts, and then we'll be properly dressed.
There we go. I mean, if we're funded to dress Western, perhaps we'll keep it in mind. But I mean, come on, it's usually a fashion atrocity.
Exactly, it is. It is. And I'm going to take it easy on you this morning, Cory. I know you're probably suffering the wounds of the social media beating that I gave you yesterday over the correct decision to spend taxpayer money on World Cup games. So I'll go straight to the news. And a fair amount of it there is already. Interestingly, we've got video of a run on a bank in China where everybody's assets had been frozen because of during COVID. Kind of sounds familiar, doesn't it? And the video shows the customers just sort of fed up and running up the stairs of the bank and trying to get in. And the warning is, hey, let's hope it doesn't come to that here. We've got a very good column from Dave Makachuk, who's opining on Justin Trudeau's visit to the Stampede on Sunday, I believe it was. And let's just say Dave's not too happy about the deal. And a very strong column there. We've got a story on the Liberals spending $660,000 to help promote French in the Yukon, even though only 85 Francophones live there. So that works out to a nice tidy $7,700 each to help them deal with the Yukon's Francophones issues. We got a story on CBC officials admit they helped craft the questions from members of the public, supposedly, that were featured during a election special with Erin O'Toole. This comes after one of the people that was picked to ask a question said the CBC had altered it. So CBC is defending themselves for changing the participants' questions, and they're not too happy about it. We got some very good stuff to come, Cory. Right now, Amanda Brown is working on the latest revelations from Hunter Biden's cell phone. Let's just say it involved drugs and hookers, and lots of both. Jonathan Bradley, who's now arrived in Calgary to begin working for a summer, has got a story on the Webb telescope and their amazing new images, their first images from deep dark space. And Melanie Risden's got a story on how Canada is becoming a hub in insect farming and a fly breeding facility north of Calgary, to help produce waste and dog food. My only question, Cory, is if you're farming flies, how does that work at branding time?
Yeah, you need some very good eyesight to work on that anyways. But I mean, I can see some prospective new markets. I've worked in the north a bit, and I tell you that there's an abundance of bugs up there if we wanted to make use of them.
Yeah, there's usually an abundance of bugs in my backyard, too. It's just a matter of trying to catch them.
Well, maybe the chickadees will eat them.
Hey, good point there. They might be useful for something.
All right. Well, thanks for the check-in. I see our copy editor is now working on correcting our pronunciation on issues as well. I'll let you discuss that with him later. And we'll talk after the show.
What's the mispronunciation?
He was asking about relevations.
Oh, okay. Yeah. My fault. Sorry, Mike.
We've got a lot of critics out there. All right. Thanks, Dave. I will talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
So that is our news editor, Dave Naylor. And yes, back behind the scenes, we have a copy editor who makes sure, and we drive him mad with our copy errors and such going out there. Not so much out of date, but I know I do some chronic ones to keep Mike upset. But hey, come on. If it wasn't for people practicing poor English like myself, that job wouldn't exist. But I guess we can, pronounce things a little better too. So again, as you can see, we've got reporters all over. We got stories coming from all over. We're breaking things. We're digging into things. And we're doing that thanks to you guys. It's not that cheesy sort of we thank you all sort of thing. I honestly mean it. Hey, that's the reason I can sit in the seat is because of subscribers. We're independently funded. We don't take a nickel of tax dollars. And that's thanks to thousands of subscribers who are kicking in $10 a month for our services. And we really appreciate it. And if you haven't already, Come on, guys, get on there. It's $99 for a year. You can try it out for free for a month to see if it's for you, and you'll see it's worth it. For less than $10 a month, you get full access to all of those stories as they break, columns, opinion pieces, lots of interesting things. We got a documentary series that's going to come out pretty soon that was done by one of our people. I'll give more details on that as we iron it out, but it's a new venture for us as well, and it's going to be well worth watching. Before we get on to my next guest, I'm looking forward to that. Just, one more news item. I just want to rant a little about the insanity of the internet. I saw this on TMZ of all things, and TMZ is usually just a gossip site, and they talk on celebrity things and so on. It's a nice distraction. I like watching that wild, weird world of the celebrities. But this site was actually disgusted and talking about how lowbrow and revolting and insane the woke have gotten on Twitter, because a discussion was going on whether or not Anne Frank suffered from white privilege. This is how insane they are getting. A young girl who, just blooming into life, had to hide with her family, and eventually her and her family were exterminated. And these witless woke assholes will actually discuss whether or not she enjoyed white privilege. You guys are mad. I'm sick and tired of you. You're finally crossing some lines. You're going way too far. You're insane. We've got to stop taking these vile people seriously any longer. And when you're even getting called out by entertainment sites, basically the National Enquirer of the internet and TV is disgusted with you, maybe you should stop and look in the mirror and think of how far you guys have gone. Either way, I just had to get that out. Like, wow, really? Okay, enough of that. Let's get on to something that's not hair-raising, and that's just talking about the city blowing billions and billions of dollars fighting climate change that probably isn't happening. And even if it was, those billions wouldn't make a difference with it. And we're going to talk to Michelle Stirling of Friends of Science, because they've been speaking up on this, for years. And of course, this is right up your alley. So thank you for joining us today, Michelle. Always good to have you on.
Thanks, Cory. Nice to be here.
Yeah.
Lots to discuss on the city.
Oh, there sure is. It's as I've, on Twitter, again, the Twitter is a mess, as I just recently said, and so on, but I still like it as a playground. And I did mean it when I said a little while back, holy cow, I actually miss Naheed Nenshi, and that's saying a lot.
Yeah, it is. I mean, he was also a climate fanatic. Oh, people have to remember that Calgary already had a climate plan, and there was also Sustainability 2020, which promised in 2010 that by 2020 we would have a prosperous economy and full equity for everyone, and things would be golden. But in fact, that's not really how it turned out. So since that was such a big failure, why would we embark on yet another similar kind of project that's even more expensive, and something that the citizens were not consulted about? Obviously the current pathways to net zero, I call it pathways to poverty. Obviously, this is a plan that was developed before the election. I mean, you can just see how it's all shaped up. It was never an election issue. It was never on the platform. But immediately after the election, the climate emergency was declared. On what basis? There's no scientific evidence showing there's a climate emergency. The latest IPCC report only mentions crisis once, and that is in regard to media coverage. There's no statement that there's a climate emergency. So, you have to wonder what kind of conniving work was going on in the background before this emergency was declared, and then this plan basically rammed through council without public input.
Well, I mean, we know, seriously, if Jody Gondek had campaigned walking around on the platform saying, I'm going to declare a climate emergency and commit $87 billion in spending, she wouldn't have come in 10th in that race. She kept it to herself purely out of political motive. It's not something she just came up with the day after becoming elected. There's no doubt about that.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, actually, I just said that there was not public input, but I take that back, because the Calgary Climate Hub, which is a project associated with the Vipon family, and the Vipons are often called the Thunbergs of Canada, if you like. This is a very activist group, very strong grassroots group. They work with the Alliance for the Common Good, Calgary Alliance for the Common Good, I think it's called. Anyway, there are a lot of well-meaning, very activist people who obviously have bent the ear of council. And, Calgarians, being an energy city, Calgarians should remember that the Calgary Climate Hub has received charitable tax receipts via Al Gore's Climate Reality. And Al Gore has been a long-term cheerleader for the destruction of Keystone and of TMX and Kinder Morgan's work trying to get a pipeline to the coast. So, we have this very activist group that's actually been funded by somebody who is completely against the city of Calgary's fundamental industry. And people should be asking a lot of questions about that. Not to mention, some of these activist groups have also been funded by unions like CUPE. And we should be asking, why are public unions that are paid by taxpayers funding these environmental groups or climate activist groups that are blocking jobs, running up crazy green crony capitalist projects like those in the climate plan, and maybe even double or triple dipping, because perhaps those union pension funds are invested in the very projects that the city is now proposing. So you see, I see it this way. Let's say you're elected to some city somewhere in the world, and just after you're elected, someone comes to you and says, hey, you know about the golden pension plan we have? Well, we have huge unfunded liabilities, and you won't get a pension unless you do this. Just think about that for a minute. And there is some evidence in an article that I saw recently from the States that that's exactly what's going on. So I think that there should be a full inquiry into this.
Absolutely. I mean, we'll get back to that. When you've got $87 billion being spent, the parasites and opportunists are going to come out of the woodworks, and the deals are going to start getting cut. I mean, it's just a massive amount in a small market. But, some of it we could kind of say it's not like we didn't have warning. There were canaries in the coal mine for a long time on this, and I dug into that a lot in years gone by, and I'm sure you're familiar with the old Imagine Calgary document.
Yes.
And then she was one of the people who wrote that. And that fairy tale of a document was tax funded. And the stuff that you read in it, it was like a parody. It was crazy with these goals and things it was setting. And most of it was laughed off at that time. But Sustainability Calgary, which is a branch of City Hall, was modeled after that ludicrous document. And it's still out there. I got it on my own site at corymorgan.com, where I broke it down, because, I mean, it is nutty. But you've got people in power. You've got a mayor. You've got a whole office of the city dedicated to following the tenets of that weird manifesto, and that was from 10 years ago. Yet
That's right.
We let it slide.
Yeah, and we also did a rebuttal report to Imagine Calgary, and that we sent to the city auditor and to the provincial auditor and to Naheed Nenshi at the time. And, of course, we never heard back from anyone. But we think that there were some very serious breaches of public trust in how these things are developed. And, of course, at a municipal level, the climate activists have much easier access to government and much, much, much more influence. One of the things to note is that Dr. Vipond's daughter, Sadie Vipond, is now a climate activist. She met with Greta Thunberg when Greta and her dad Svante were here in Calgary. And I think she even gave her jacket or something like that. And so Sadie is suing the Canadian government along with a group of other kids with eco-justice. So there's more taxpayers' dollars that are being totally wasted on ridiculous efforts to stop climate change when climate has been changing for 4.5 billion years, and the best thing we could do is to adapt to the real threats like flooding in the river valley, like extreme weather. We should have sufficient winter road clearing equipment, so that people aren't waiting for a Chinook so they can get out of their driveway. I mean, these are the practical things that a city is supposed to take care of. They're not supposed to be trying to reduce the emissions of Calgary, which are nothing compared to China's, which China admits 28% of the world's emissions. Canada, all of Canada, 1.6% of the world's emissions. So nothing we do in Calgary or in Canada will stop global warming if that's your concern. Nothing we do will stop it.
Yeah, and then
It's just empty virtue signaling.
well, plus they give this baloney out all the time saying if we don't do it, it's going to cost us more. They never exactly say how. But then if they attribute anything and everything to climate change, they might be able to try and make that case. Oh, well, there'll be more flooding and it'll cost this, or there'll be more forest fires and it'll cost this. But even with all of the natural events that have happened over the last few years, nothing is going to add up to $87 billion, and nothing we do is going to change those events from happening.
Right. And a lot of people don't know that Calgary had 8 of the worst floods prior to 1933, and 2 of those floods had higher stream flows than the one of 2013. That's long before human influence on climate change was even attributed. And they also make reference to the Fort McMurray wildfire in their document. Well, that was under an extreme weather condition, and it was poorly managed by the NDP at the time. In fact, Rachel Notley, remember her standing up in the House and mocking Brian Jean as he was begging her to send water bombers? Well, his house burned down a few hours later. She was mocking him for fear mongering. So, just like winter snowstorms where you need road clearance equipment, we live near the boreal forest. Well, Calgary, not so much, but Edmonton and north, and you're going to have wildfires. It's a seasonal occurrence. So be prepared. And that's what we should be spending the money on, is being prepared for these real events that will happen every year, sometimes greater, sometimes lesser, but we should be prepared and not be spending money on trying to make people ride a bike to work. If they want to, go ahead, but not everyone's going to want to. And let's say if you're 75, you're not going to want to ride a bike to the grocery store, because if you fall off, then you'll be in hospital with a broken hip. Some of these plans are just totally ludicrous.
Yeah, well, the event that happened this year was Canada Day skiing at Sunshine Village in the mountains. It was cool enough that we could ski in July.
Yeah, so much for the heat dome.
and then at the same time, Mayor Gondek just does seem to love emergencies. All of those threats for the flood that never was. I mean, we poured dirt all over the streets and we put the city on edge and we declared another state of emergency for something that never even came close. I mean, I understand being prepared, watching, fair enough. They'll catch it if the river did burst the banks and nothing had been done. But from all reports out of that too, the reservoirs were still nearly empty. The water flow was controlled. They thrive on keeping the population afraid.
Yes. Well, I think it probably was prudent to drop the reservoir somewhat, because the reports coming in, the forecast was fairly significant rainfall, and you never know if you'll get that or not. I mean, I think in the 2013 flood, initially the reports were that it wouldn't be that much rain, and it kind of quickly went from 50 millimeters to 100 to 150 millimeters, and then people were going, oh my God. So you never really know. But, one thing to think about when you empty a reservoir like that, that's a huge body of water. You better hope you're going to get enough rain and runoff after that to refill it, because you've got a city of 1.6 million people and that's their source of water. So, dropping the reservoir is a plan that you can use to help mitigate a flood, but it also may have significant consequences, unintended consequences down the road. And I guess we'll have to see this summer. I don't know if it's filled up again or not. I think there's still snowpack up in the hills. But again, we're spending money in the wrong places. We're spending it on green crony capitalists. We're going along with activists. We're not doing a full cost benefit analysis. We have a blog post where we have our City of Calgary emergency rebuttal report. We have our 2 2017 reports, which also address the climate plans of that time. And I'm also going to put up our rebuttal to Catherine Hayhoe. Now, Dr. Hayhoe is a fairly well-known climate science communicator. I think she was judged to be in the top 100 science communicators by Time magazine. But she's hooked on what's called RCP 8.5, which is a catastrophic scenario that's deemed to be implausible by the climate science community, but that's the one she concentrates on as business as usual. And she's been a consultant to the city of Calgary, so we know where this wrong information is coming from. And so people should read our report. It's called Facts versus Fortune Telling, and I'll be posting it right after the show on the same blog post about our climate emergency rebuttals.
And I'll ask at the end as well. I mean, just to remind everybody, but yeah, the Friends of Science website and blog post, they're a fantastic resource. Always lots of information and sources and science behind it, of course. Going further, I mean, into the costs, I've heard apologists for this plan saying, look, it's not all straight tax dollars. We're not just going to raise it 87 billion. The private market's going to fill it, and other levels of government are going to fill it. That still always ends up coming out of our wallet, though.
Yeah, other levels of government, where do you think they get their money from? They get it from taxpayers. That's you. And I mean, people should be aware that the city of Ottawa is also doing a big climate plan, $60 billion. So you Calgarians will be able to help Ottawa pay for their $60 billion climate plan, while Ottawa will be able to help us pay for our $87 billion climate plan. Now, to see how that's not going to work out, like, when are we going to run out of money?
Well, and some of these costs as well are costs, I guess, that they're estimating because they're going to be imposing retrofitting on existing buildings, possibly even personal homes, definitely in the commercial sector, even though we got over 30% vacancy as it is. Putting more expense on Calgary's offices, I don't think is going to help. But these costs, again, they're buried in a whole number of ways they plan to expend it, and they try to obfuscate by claiming it's going to be coming out of here and coming out of there. But again, it always comes out of us in the end.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and actually, one citizen sent us in a letter that they had sent to actually the David Suzuki Foundation, which was campaigning for the city and its residents to sign on to this deal. And this person noted that of the tab, that the Calgary 2022 net expenditures are 4.5 billion. So if we break down the 87 billion tab by year, that would be 3.1 billion a year, which is 69% of the current municipal expenditures. So, what's going to happen to all the ordinary necessary things like road maintenance, taking trees down when we've had a big windfall, running our fire department, police department? These are vital services. This is what the city should be taking care of. As I said, China emits in 1 month what all of Canada emits in a year and a half. So spending all this money will do absolutely zero to stop climate change, but it will make a lot of green cronies rich. And we should be asking who those people are and how they are skimming the public purse, because that's what it really amounts to.
Well, yeah, if we want to get to the bottom of it, when they bring in a law saying all of these businesses or buildings have to be retrofitted, I'd like to see who the contractors are who are going to be establishing that, or even what has to be done, or the inspections. There's a whole lot of people who are going to benefit a heck of a lot from this sudden milking of individuals of their funds. And let's not pretend we're not going to see some sole source contracts going out there.
Right. And I mean, all we have to do is look at Germany right now, which has spent trillions of dollars trying to go green and go net zero and go all wind and solar. Their entire industry is on its knees. Like, Germany is on the brink of collapse because they haven't had thoughtful energy and climate policies. They've had ridiculous energy and climate policies, very similar to those discussed in this $87 billion climate plan. And we have to ask, who are the people who are doing the consulting? I'm reading a book by Jeremy Rifkin called the Near Zero Something Society. And he brags about consulting to Merkel. Well, he's not an engineer. He's a futurist. So it's all nice to sit around and dream of how the world might be, just like the Imagine Calgary crew did. What's it going to look like 100 years from now? Well, my grandmother spent her honeymoon at the Calgary Stampede, the first one in 1912. And she could not have ever imagined how Calgary would be 100 years later. That's how ridiculous these kinds of exercises are. And we should not be bankrupting our city and, allowing people who hate the energy industry to drive the agenda that runs our city. That's absurd. It's self-destructive. Why are we doing it?
Well, absolutely. And there's a lot of goals set out in that document that they don't specify how they're going to get to them. But things such as that, 60% of the city or more is going to be either riding a bike or taking the bus to work. They're not going to use cars anymore. And I mean, it's clearly ridiculous. They can't even get people to ride the train today because they're too scared to take on the addicts who've taken over the transit system. But when push comes to shove and they get desperate, I can see some crazy measures like closing roads, taxing cars, all sorts of means to try and force people to take, the crack trains to come downtown to the empty offices. But it's just not going to happen. It's just going to be cost with no benefit.
Well, as you say, it's going to be an eco-dictatorship. And, if you look at Deutsche Bank, that's their answer to Build Back Better, is to impose an eco-dictatorship on society. And one of the examples that Deutsche Bank gives is the idea of retrofitting a house, that some people may not want to retrofit their house because it might make your house look pretty ugly, or some people may not have the money, or they may simply not want to comply. Well, their answer to that is to simply impose an eco-dictatorship. So, there's another thing that people should look at on our YouTube page, and that's a presentation that Donna Laframboise did for us. She's an investigative journalist, and she's been working on the climate file for many years. And it's about how climate activism is taking away your freedom of choice, freedom of speech, and freedom of thought. And that's exactly what we see happening.
Yeah, no, and the trend isn't stopping. It's getting worse. So and I appreciate the work you guys have been doing to try and shine a light on it, and you're still working at it. And so, I mean, just that one last time, where can people find, as you said, you got a YouTube page, you've got a blog, there's a lot of resources. If we can point people that way to find out more details on what's happening.
Thank you. Yes, we're on our website is friendsofscience.org. We have a Facebook page. We're on LinkedIn. We're on Twitter. We're all over YouTube, and we have quite a lot of very popular YouTube videos. We actually do have a YouTube rebuttal to the City of Calgary plan, which is one of the top ones that you'll see in the first line of our YouTube videos. But we've got lots of different scientific presentations for people who want that more hard science, and we've got more public commentaries and plain language explanations. So you can also become a member. You can also donate to us. We're into our 20th year of operation. Even $20 would be helpful. So thank you for giving us a bit of a platform, and let's stop this crazy climate nonsense. We got to stop it.
I appreciate the work you're doing, and then appreciate you coming on to talk to us. It's always a good conversation. So thanks, Michelle. I'm sure we'll be talking again soon.
Thank you. Okay.
Thanks. So that's Michelle Stirling of the Friends of Science. You saw those resources. Of course, wait till after my show before going to their YouTube channel. But after that, by all means, get in there. There is some great stuff on there, and they really dig in, as Michelle was saying, the bit more of the dry. I mean, well, there's a lot of good, engaging stuff as well. And if you want to dig further into the stats and the numbers, they've got all of that there. It's fantastic. They're a great resource, and they're shouting out what we need to hear. We just need to make sure to get the word out. I mean, it's never a done deal. You got to keep fighting back, even if it feels futile at times. Excuse me, I promise that's not COVID. All right. So I'm going to speak to one of our sponsors quickly before I go on further, and that is the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. I talk about them every show because they're a great sponsor, and because if you own a firearm, if you're considering owning a firearm, or if you just support other people's rights to own firearms, you got to be a member to these guys. Man, that bug. Maybe it is COVID. So yes, the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Look, we know the Liberals are coming for your firearms. We know they're coming for your property. They don't respect your rights. You've got to stand up for yourself. And the only way to do that is to work in numbers, get together. Excuse me. This is the day I forget to bring a water jug. So check out the Canadian Shooting Sports Association before I cough myself to death here. And take out a membership. We're going to have to get an outtakes for the show one of these days. Oh, man, it's good to see on the camera the colors I'm taking. So either way, yeah, I was eating some peanuts before I come on here. Sometimes you get something in the back of your throat. Seems to be what's going on. So check them out. I'm not gagging at the thought of it. The Canadian Shooting Sports Association, take out a membership. They're a great sponsor. Nico's got me some water. As Lisa's saying, yes, Cory needs water, SOS. Much appreciated. I think we've been rescued. I can get on with the show without coughing in your ears any further. And, man, bad peanut. Maybe it's all that air pollution because we didn't follow Imagine Calgary. Okay, I'll get on to some ranting and moving further with that. Some of the stuff that, again, Michelle was talking about. I mean, this city and how nuts it's been with the climate stuff. If you look back on Mayor Gondek's history, and we see this with socialists, we see it everywhere. You see it with the left. One of the things that always has to be done is to damn people in. You've got to force them in. Man, you never hear of any socialist country without an Iron Curtain. It's the only ideology that has to force its citizens to stay. One of the great memes out there is one that says, socialism idea is so great they have to be mandatory and usually show a government hand holding a gun. There's some truth to that. One of Gondek's biggest things when she was a city councillor was getting upset that people were moving out of the city and living in bedroom communities, or businesses were moving out of the city and setting up shop outside of the reach of the city of Calgary. And she would always demand, they have to stop this. We have to intervene. Somehow we have to block people from leaving this city, because that's what's killing her plans right now. That's why we've got 34% vacancy in Calgary's office buildings right now. That's why my property out in Pritis, every time Gondek opens her mouth, my property values go up a little bit, because people are escaping. They're leaving. And that leads to a failure every time. Again, when they have taken their woke politics, their cowardly politics, and messed with city transit so badly that it's overrun with addicts and people don't want to ride on it, they've gone to another option. They've gone to a car. It drives Gondek and the others nuts. But they can't reason. It's like Michelle was saying. It would become a dictatorship. They won't accept that people aren't going to give up their cars to ride this rotten transit system. They're figuring, how can we block the cars? How can we make them more miserable? It's like the bike tracks and bike lanes you see all over the place. And again, as soon as there's 10 raindrops, 90% of the cyclists aren't out there riding. Oh, there's a bunch of hardcore spandex fetishists who will come out in all weather, and they love to celebrate that. Look at me, I'm a winter cyclist. Good for you. 99% of the city isn't. But you're taking up now probably about 10% of the downtown lanes with these cycle tracks that nobody's riding on. The city knows that. They know that there's 100 to 1 cars to bicycles on the streets downtown. What it is a campaign of harassment. They think if they can make it so inconvenient, such a pain in the butt, so annoying to use your car, that you'll just finally throw up your hands and say, oh, fine, I'll ride a bicycle to work. Well, I tell you what, it's not going to happen from Pritis. It's not going to happen for a lot of seniors. I mean, think about it. Does every office have a shower for you to get into in summer when it's hot when you ride the bike? Or you really want to go dedicate that extra hour, 2 hours, 3 hours a day to your transportation? Or do you really want to squash onto the bus all the time? This anti-car thing. I mean, they claim to care about the little guy, but they don't. They claim to talk about how lower income people struggle, or people, single parents, have difficulty raising kids. Well, take 4 kids and go to a grocery store and buy your food for the week without a vehicle. Try it. See how that works out. Get on the bus. Do it. Ride a bicycle. Have the whole family ride bikes maybe. Come on, you guys. Get real. These are essential tools. When a person doesn't have a personal vehicle as well, you know what they also have? Fewer work options. Because again, transit isn't necessarily reliable or serving every area well enough for a person to get to. When a person, say again, has the ability to take the kids to school and then drive to their workplace and put in a good day's work, that car empowers them. Again, these hypocritical leftists claim to care for the little guy, claim to care for the working man, but when it comes to things such as a personal vehicle, which does empower the working man, they don't want to support that. They have a double standard. Their ideology blinds them to reality. But I mean, again, look at the people who are talking about it. These are city councillors making 6-figure incomes saying the Calgary Transit's perfectly fine, yet they've never actually ridden on it. They're not going to go on there and smell the piss and sit with an addict. They're going to listen to their advisors who give them fluffy woke crap and blow sunshine up their butts. There's no reality in City Hall. Same with the senior city administrators. That was something I brought in Colin Craig from 2nd Street Org. We talked about. It showed that hypocrisy of them. What they offer for all these city councilors and senior city staff, free parking. They get parking passes to park all over the city. Well, shouldn't they just get bus passes? I thought we were all supposed to ride, or couldn't they ride their bikes? I mean, maybe give them a little coupon so they can buy a cheaper bicycle. Wouldn't that be more effective than giving them free parking? I thought we're supposed to get out of our cars, but they're hypocrites. The commoners are the ones who are supposed to sacrifice to save the environment, not those fine leaders in City Hall. They can't go without those conveniences. They're far too important for that. How dare you ask for those things? Either way, as I said, I mean, on a self-interested sort of way, I live in a bedroom community just outside the city of Calgary, and our property values are doing better and better all the time. You know what? My property taxes are far lower than the city, and the way I know that it snowed in the night in the wintertime, I wake up because I hear the plow outside at 5 in the morning. There's people in districts in Calgary who've never heard a snow plow their whole life because they don't go onto the back streets. We're too busy spending all our money on climate initiatives, and we can't get the snow off our streets. So yeah, Jody, keep up the good work, and let's see if we can get up to 50% vacancy downtown. Set a record. You know, pick up where Nenshi started and see if we can create North America's biggest, most modern developed ghost town. I mean, that could become a tourist attraction of its own. It's no wonder The Last of Us came to film in Calgary. I mean, there's parts of downtown because it's a production that was showing a dystopian post-apocalyptic world. They didn't have to do a heck of a lot of work. Close a few city blocks. You've already got all the garbage and broken down vehicles and boarded up businesses. Hell, it was half their work was done for them. No wonder they chose Calgary. But it would be better to have a ongoing industry to carry these things on rather than just allowing downtown deterioration to continue. But again, I saw our state broadcaster with a story today talking about Calgary's transit and saying, you know, more people would ride if we just redesigned the stations. Look, we got 3 stations closed down because the city was too scared to evict the junkies from them. They're closed. They've been closed since February. You can't get into Heritage or Anderson or Southland right now. They've been closed up, locked doors. You have to walk outside, not across the tracks, because they'd turned into homeless encampments. They won't enforce the law to do it. And they think we can redesign the stations and that's what's going to make people come back. No, you're just going to make a nicer station for the junkies to live in. You got to enforce the bloody law and get these people out of there. But these guys are not in tune with reality. They don't get it. They won't get it. All right, enough bitching out of me. I brought somebody new in to bitch about some other stuff. And we've got Jay Hill here in person. And it's always great to have you come in, Jay, and talk about a number of issues. So good to see you. It's been a few days.
I love to be back.
Yeah. So I got a head of steam up, you know, these environmental things get me.
Well, I think that's what's why your program is popular.
For some people.
Well, even for those that like to disagree with you, I think that it gives them someone to disagree with.
Well, there we go. And again, as I've said before too, it's good for Jane, you know, my wife, so she doesn't have to listen to me going on and on. Get it out of my system while I'm here. And then I can annoy her with other, you know,
with other
things. Yeah. I'm still annoying when I get there, but it'll be different stuff.
With what you're making for dinner.
That's right. What kind of bad meal am I going to treat her with tonight? Oh, well. So, yeah, I'm glad to have you in. I want to talk about a few things. We always find it easy to talk about a number of things, but the whole Tamara Lich thing.
Yeah.
You know,
which is a nice segue from what you were just ranting about enforcing the law where it should be enforced.
Yeah, I mean, there's where some of the discussion could even start. You know, people talk about, well, she violated a bail condition, thus she's locked up. Maybe I'll leave that open to interpretation. Maybe she did not fully, properly, you know, when she paused, she shouldn't have spent that 3 seconds with that person. But that's why you have a judge, not a computer.
Yeah.
In a room. I mean, you work as what is realistic of enough violation that warrants full incarceration, or maybe a warning, or maybe just telling the police, come on, guys, get serious. Like, there's the spirit of the law and there's the letter of the law.
Yeah.
And she's getting beaten by every aspect of the law right now.
Well, I think it's just appalling. And just to your point, you know, I can't understand what the hell is wrong with Canadians right now that they let this go on. And, you know, as I've been saying on social media the last little while, whether you were supportive or not of the Freedom Convoy and the demonstration and protest in Ottawa that resulted from that, whether you supported their initiative, you know, to draw attention to the truckers' mandates, which was the original cause that they were protesting democratically, peacefully with that convoy across Canada, you should still be appalled by what is happening to Tamara Lich. I mean, here is a kind, generous, grandmother, for goodness sake, with not much for, financial means, that helped to organize this protest, a peaceful protest, which she reinforced that message constantly. In fact, I congratulated her at the end when she was finally let out of jail the first time. I congratulated her as a novice for staying on message, something that politicians can't do, but she managed to stay on message. She didn't get distracted when some of the more loony bin fellas were talking about overthrowing the government and staying there until Justin Trudeau resigned and some of that nonsense. She stayed on message that this was a matter of rights, a matter of democracy. And that's why she was there. And she's being punished like this. And, today I posted on Twitter a sign, and it says, "Imagine how much better Canada would be if the justice system pursued child rapists with the same vigor they have with Tamara Lich and her mischief charges." And what that solicited, I mean, there was a lot of support that came through, Cory,
yeah.
but there was people saying, well, she should be locked up. She's a terrorist.
Well, I'm giggling a bit, but not over that. But just that image that's been going around, that's actually a direct quote from one of my tweets from about a week ago that somebody took and made into an image. I'm glad it made it full circle and it's going out there, but that's the point. There's levels and levels, and where our justice system should be prioritizing. And yeah, we don't go after child molesters with the vigor and expense that we have been going after. And I'll say we, because we're Canadians, we're putting up with this, as you said at the start, are going after Tamara Lich. And that's why I wanted to bring you into it, because you know her. I mean, I'm talking about a character reference. When we're talking about the spirit of the law, then that also means, does this person present a risk to society if she's let out? Is she unstable? Is she not a good person? If she was sort of a lunatic who'd come to some meetings and so on, you'd probably just go, oh, geez, they're being persecuted, but I'm not really going to stand up and say a lot on the person's character anyways, because it's just not something to speak to. But Tamara's not crazy.
No, not in the least. And, this is what's so frustrating for those of us that know Tamara and know her well. I mean, I had the pleasure and the privilege of working with Tamara for about 2 years now, ever since I came out of retirement and started a new political party that evolved into the Maverick Party, the West's only federal party. And Tamara was on the original board of directors. She stayed there. She worked hard. Despite the challenges that she was facing in her personal life because of the financial upset of losing her employment. And her husband had to relocate to Manitoba for a while. Then they came back. She's always been involved in causes that are near and dear to her heart. And as I said earlier, she's the type of grandma that cannot sit idly by when she sees an injustice, when she sees that our rights and our democratic institution, basically, our constitutional rights are under attack by our own government. And so she got involved. That was all. She got involved with this effort to peacefully protest with this convoy and eventually in Ottawa. And now she's being persecuted. That's the word that my friend Preston Manning used in his newspaper column of a couple days ago. She's being persecuted by our own government. And it's absolutely appalling. As I've said repeatedly, and as you've said, every single Canadian should be very, very concerned about this, that she is being kept in jail now, but not by a judge, by a justice of the peace that made this ruling on Friday to keep her incarcerated. What is this costing taxpayers to persecute this grandmother?
Oh, I mean, they spent hundreds of thousands just to fly homicide detectives across the country to arrest her. I mean, the money being flushed because she paused next to somebody. Remember, that's the crime she's in for right now. She paused with somebody she's not supposed to be with for 3 seconds in a picture in a video, which again, technically, maybe if you're really a hair splitter, you could say, wow, you crossed the line. We had a legal breakdown of that actually from one of our columnists, Karen Selleck, and she's a lawyer. And again, going into how unreasonable that offense supposedly in the bail is. I mean, that's again why you have a judge. And not a justice. She really goes into this justice of the peace. This wasn't even one who was a former lawyer.
No.
And people got to remember. So this was not a legal
so
expert.
what did he base his ruling on? This is the part that puzzles people.
Yeah, and Karen questioned it quite interestingly because she said, and he had to sit for 4 days and come up with this, and he didn't give a written version. He just gave an oral, which he said typically they're going to give something written, but speculation. Was he dwelling on this, or was he asking certain people, what do you want me to do about this?
Yeah, certain people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
far be it for us, ladies and gentlemen, to suggest that there would be any political interference in these types of rulings or what's been going on in this courtroom, where a identified partisan prosecutor, right? I mean, he's contributed thousands of dollars, as you've said and others have said, to the Liberal Party of Canada, and he's allowed to go on for hours ranting about Tamara as though she truly is a terrorist, rather than somebody that believed in democracy in Canada.
He's been almost obsessive with it. And something I've speculated too, though, in past columns I wrote, I think it was for the Calgary Standard, but either way, it was I think part of the reason they're after her is because she doesn't present the visible example of what they would like to point out as a convoy leader. She's not a crazed person running around screaming through a bullhorn, or a long history of arrests or a long history of organization. She doesn't have a swastika tattooed on her forehead.
She's not wearing camouflage.
No, when people listen to her speak and they see her and they realize, even if they don't agree with her, whatever this person is, this isn't a threat to society. Because it ruins that narrative this government's desperately trying to hang on to, that this was a borderline insurrection, that this was led by crazed people. And she puts lie to that. If she's out speaking, if she's allowed to go on social media, which she hasn't been, she's been following that bail condition. It must be hard for an outspoken person to go months and months and not even make a peep. And she stuck to that.
Yeah.
But that's why they're afraid of her. She gives the wrong example. If she was a screaming, raging lunatic, they'd say, get out and get on Facebook as hard as you can because you're making our work easier for us.
Yeah, you're making our case. But they don't have a case, really. I mean, if we reflect back to when she was arrested, okay, in Ottawa after this protest, I'll call it a protest. I mean, the people that are so upset about this apparently call it a blockade or an occupation, or they trump up all these kind of charges against, which was they were bouncy castles. They were protesters shoveling snow for the people. They were supporting local businesses that had been in tough times, the local coffee shops and restaurants and hotels. And in any event, because they blew their horns a little bit too much and drew attention to themselves, they were into a situation of an occupation. It's all been such nonsense. And, there was a real hue and cry from the government and from the mayor of Ottawa, Jim Watson, when it was shown that when the police started to move in to clear the protesters, she said, what did she say? She said, hold the line. That meant, according to the government and the courts, she was inciting mischief. My God, what a terrible crime. But reflect back, ladies and gentlemen, on our history of labor unrest in this country, okay?
Think of the Winnipeg riots.
Yeah, how many times in our history, including fairly recently, have we witnessed strikes where justifiably, strikers are saying to their colleagues when faced with the police trying to break up the strikers' line with their placards, right? They're trying to break them up, and they say, hold the line. You hear about those guys being arrested, thrown in jail for 18 days, being denied bail, and then rearrested? No. It's recognized that labor has a right to strike and protest. But she doesn't. She doesn't. And this convoy, this protest in Ottawa has, apparently they don't have that right.
Well, and the government's, again, their case is falling apart. And I think that's why they're afraid. I mean, the Senate committees are ripping into them. The parliamentary committees are ripping in. I've got a feeling, we'll see, but this justice who might be questionable, who's leading the investigation, we'll hope not, though, and he takes it seriously. They're not going to be able to make their case for invoking the Emergencies Act. And even arguably, if people say that the protest had outstayed its welcome. Maybe they were there too long. It was time to move them along.
Yep.
You know, we can debate that. That's fair enough. But there was no police. That was the other thing, saying that we can't do this without the Emergencies Act. They were saying, just let us do this. We can do it. They cleared the border down in Windsor. They cleared the Alberta border where those other side blockades were. That was before the Emergencies Act was imposed. They were
And not only that, but people buy into our mainstream media, bought and paid for liberal media. They buy into their argument that those blockades at the Ambassador Bridge and here in Alberta at Coots were somehow linked to what was going on in Ottawa. I know that for a fact. You know that that is not true. That these were people, just common people that said, you know what, we're going to rise up because of what's happening in Ottawa. Sure. But that did not have the approval, the support, or the affiliation of the protesters in Ottawa.
No.
And yet the media, the mainstream media, were just all over themselves, buying into the Liberals' arguments that, oh my God, look what's happening. This is growing all across the nation. Well, yes, in a way it was growing, but it had nothing to do with Tamara Lich.
No, and the media embarrassed itself over the course of that whole affair. I mean, they bought into all of the BS myths, that fake Twitter thread of a supposed arson. I remember people getting on my case at that time because I called BS as soon as I saw this stinks. This is baloney. This guy's making this crap up. But the media jumped on, they reported on, and guess what? It was
true.
BS.
Yeah.
Justin Ling puts his thing out claiming that guns had been seized. Total BS. But the media seized on it, used it.
And there was supposedly some sort of a
Russian
weird
funding.
connection to, you know, the illegal importation of firearms and this big seizure that the police had made somewhere else in Ontario, and they kind of linked it to what was going on in Ottawa,
Yeah.
and it was all BS.
No, and again, that's part of it too, is we've got a legacy media that Leash embarrasses, again, as a symbol, because she's not everything they're trying to say this protest was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, this Emergencies Act, they could have cleared that protest without invoking it.
Well, you know, it's starting to come out, and perhaps we'll see this confirmed with the investigation. As you say, the justice, the judge that is leading that investigation, hopefully he's going to do as thorough a job as Justice Gomery did with the infamous Liberal sponsorship scandal of a few years ago. And if he digs that deep and does that type of job, I think he'll do an enormous service to Canadians. But Cory, I mean, it is becoming quite clear that the Emergencies Act, at least partially, was brought in not because the police asked for it, not the Ottawa police, not the Ontario Provincial Police, not the RCMP, nobody, despite what the minister lied about in the House of Commons, House of Commons in question period. You know, what was the reason? Well, now it's starting to be suggested it was because tow truck drivers, owners, and companies refused to tow these vehicles. So how can our Prime Minister and the Mayor of Ottawa tow these trucks if he doesn't have any tow trucks? I mean, government doesn't own tow trucks, but if they had the Emergencies Act, if they had effectively martial law, the Prime Minister can do anything he wants, including ordering tow trucks to tow these vehicles, or they themselves will be punished under law.
Well, that's it. And not enough citizens realize how serious the invocation of that act is. I mean, it used to be called the War Measures Act, and they should have kept it that way because people would realize how serious it is when it's brought in, not just your run-of-the-mill emergency.
Yeah.
Because what it is a form of martial law. And what that means is you are going to suspend charter rights for people in the face of an emergency. And of all of those, I don't think it was even used necessarily, but symbolically, of being able to force a tow truck driver to labor for them, basically, and I say with a gun to their head. And I mean, I know there wasn't a literal one, but hey, if you eventually push the police far enough when you've got an order against you, that's what you could end up with.
Yeah.
And then they wanted to press gangs. I mean, you know, they could come on the street and grab you and forced labor. This is not a minor thing. This is what happens in third world countries. People have to understand how serious that was and what was invoked there. And I don't think enough Canadians get it.
No. You know, I was thinking about, where is it here? I was thinking about this, of course, yesterday and the day before as I was tweeting and posting on Facebook about Tamara and this injustice. And I came across this famous quote. by a Lutheran pastor a number of years ago. And we've often heard it, but I want to read it out. And I wrote it down, Cory, to make sure I didn't misquote. First, they came for the socialist, and I did not speak out because I wasn't a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionist, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. You know, end of quote. Cory, I know that some people will be appalled that I said that and that I'm overstating it, but I don't believe I am. If we as Canadians allow Tamara Lich to be persecuted in this way, to remain behind bars for mischief, for a peaceful democratic protest, I think this country is going down a very slippery slope.
That's it. That's that principle of standing up for the rights of others, even if you don't necessarily agree with their cause. And actually, if you want to hang around, if you got a few more minutes, I got to cut away because we got a live hit coming from the Stampede grounds. But I'd like to talk more on this if you want to stay in studio while we do that.
Absolutely.
Great. So Jay and I are going to talk a little more, but I see our Melanie Risdom down on the Stampede grounds live, and we're going to pop in. Like I said, we're going to have some specials tomorrow. We'll do a bit of that. And she's speaking. Hey, Melanie, how's it going?
We're at the Stampede, and we're up very, very high. My goodness, we are almost at the top of this huge Ferris wheel. And joining me right now is it's Scooter, and he is the Vice President of Client Services for the North American Midway. Scooter, tell us what we're on right now.
Well, we were able to bring a super wheel with us this year, which is 150.
You have to speak really loudly. We're having some sound.
Wheel. It has 36 client-controlled buckets. We're sitting in some nice air conditioning right now, and it gives you absolutely amazing sweeping views of the city of Calgary, the Rocky Mountains, the whole Stampede Park, the Midway area, and also the new construction. We're really thrilled that we're able to bring it to the Calgary Stampede this year.
Well, and we even have like a see-through floor here. I don't know if you can get a zoom of that, but you can see right through the floor here. There's my foot. So it's pretty cool. What else is new on the ground, Scooter?
So we also brought two other rides with us. We brought the Raptor Run, which is a great ride for the Great Frontier. It's a family ride made for a mom and dad and the kids, so young at heart. We also brought the only traveling double-decker merry-go-round in North America, and it's right inside the big floor, right next to the Super Wheel. And not only is that a North American Midway showpiece, it's also a really good ride, and it's been very, very well received. It's been very, very popular.
Yeah, and it has been an absolutely packed Stampede so far. You must be kind of happy to be back at it.
Yeah, at the beginning of the Stampede, somebody asked me how many people were going to come this year, and I said everyone, and I was right. Everyone did show up. We had an amazing weekend. We had a great yesterday, and today with Community Day, it seems like Calgary's back here visiting us with us today. It's been spectacular so far. And the people in Calgary really supported this event, and they're coming out in droves this year. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, it's great. Now, you have been doing this for quite a few years. Why don't you tell us how you got started sort of running things here on the Midway?
Well, I started in 1977. I graduated from high school. I waited in line for about 3 hours for a job at the Stampede, which I landed one. And I came to work the next day and found out actually I was working for the carnival. And then one thing led to the next. And 45 years later, I'm sitting right here talking to you, enjoying every minute of it.
Yeah, so you actually joined the circus, kind of. You get to travel with this amazing Midway kind of all over the North America.
Yeah, our company plays 124 events a year. We see about 15 million people. The unit that I'm involved with, we play 18 fairs, 9 in Canada and 9 in the United States. We kind of follow the sun. We start in the United States in the spring and work our way through Canada in the summertime, and then back in the United States into November. So I'm on the road about 9 months a year, and then back home to Calgary.
Yeah, Calgarian. And so again, these pods are air conditioning, so it's, boy, is it a treat because it is hot down here with the pavement. What would you say, Scooter, is the ride, like the number one ride? What are people lining up the most for?
Well, our Crazy Mouse roller coaster is always popular with everybody. And on a hot day like today, the Niagara Falls Flume is a great way to cool down. And of course, what about the iconic Do You Want to Go Faster Polar Express?
Yeah.
And what would be the Stampede without the zipper ride? So I think, that's really kind of our top ones, and kind of our fan favorites.
And as far as the rides are concerned, what else do you kind of, what else do you sort of orchestrate here on the grounds? Games and other things?
So we have a whole bunch of rides, but also we have 60 some odd games too. So teddy bears for some love affairs, and we have 18 great food stands, which augments the Calgary Stampede. Fantastic lineup of food: mini donuts, lemonade, pizza, cotton candy, corn dogs, of course. So, that kind of rounds out North American Midway, which is rides, games, and foods.
And speaking of foods, I think there are a few different things that people can try every year. What are some of the new to tries this year on the Midway?
Well, on the Stampede side, they're a little bit more adventurous than we are. We at North American Midway, we stick with those staple carnival favorite foods like mini donuts and cotton candy and pizza and corn dogs. That's kind of our thing. There's some people that are booked with the Stampede that have tried some adventurous things, and I hear they're doing very, very well.
Yeah, I heard. I walked by a booth the other day that had hot dogs with crickets, and I think there were other things you could get that had kind of crickets and whatnot in them. So we're going up one more time here. Maybe we'll show another view of the grounds. And there's a lot of construction happening here at the grounds this year too. Just a huge expansion of the BMO Center. Which is, it's kind of out of the way. It's not really affecting anything down here on the grounds, and lots of room to come down and have a look. What's the highlight for you every year?
I've got a lot of friends here. Excuse me, I have a lot of friends here at the Stampede. I've known them for many years, so I guess that's my highlight. And then how Calgary comes together to produce this event. Sometimes I get the feeling we don't know in Calgary how good this event is, but it really is on a world stage. We are right up there.
Well, and I think every politician in Canada makes their way this way. I heard Trudeau was just down at the grounds. Did you see him?
They actually put his son on the Mega Drop. We wanted to go for a ride on the Mega Drop, so he took his son on the Mega Drop. We had a great afternoon with him.
Well, that's great. Was there a lot of fanfare and was it quite busy around him?
Oh yeah. Well, of course, Sunday is the family day, and so the Prime Minister came on Sunday, so he was surrounded by hundreds of thousands of people. So it was a pretty exciting time to see the Prime Minister come down and visit the Stampede. He's come here many times before, and we're always welcome to invite him and to have him join us.
Now, let's just talk about a couple more days ahead of us for the Stampede. We're tomorrow. Tell me about tomorrow and what else people can look forward to.
Well, tomorrow is Kids' Day, of course, and that's always been a great day here at the Calgary Stampede. It's great for young kids and their families to come on down and enjoy the Stampede. And then we're going to wrap it up with the weekend. And, there's a fantastic lineup in the Coke stage. We got Blake Shelton on Saturday night in the Saddle Dome. Of course, Chuck Wagons in the Grandstand show, the rodeo in the afternoon. There's a lot of things going on.
Well, you know what, Cory, unfortunately, I can't hear you, so I will let you know that. But we're going to be down here again tomorrow, and we're going to be checking in and finding out a little bit more about some of that rest of the entertainment that's going to be down at the Stampede for the last, half week of Stampede. So thanks so much for joining us, Scooter, and happy to have you back in Calgary for this. And where are you off to next?
We're going to go to KD's in Edmonton.
Awesome. All right. Well, we will see you down at the grounds.
Okay, so yeah, that was our Melanie Risden coming live from the Stampede grounds. I'm eating this cough today. I didn't expect her to come live from a Ferris wheel, but there you go. And quite an appearance.
This cough, Cory, do I need to go and get another shot right away?
Oh, I just got to mask myself. I had that earlier. It was just nice to break away, and Mel went down there to the grounds. I mean, we do have nice weather. We are due to just get out and live a little,
Exactly.
enjoy ourselves. I mean,
Yeah.
I know the Stampede's expensive, and it's kind of the same all the time. But I'm going to get down there this year because I haven't been in a few years, and everybody's been cooped up. And what the heck, buy some overpriced drinks, walk around. I don't think I'll eat those insect-filled hot dogs Melanie was talking about. But then when you're talking hot dogs, you probably had a pretty high chance that there was something in there before. Anyway. Just don't think about it.
Exactly. Just enjoy. And it's, as you're saying, it's so terrific after being cooped up for a couple of years now, and to support the hundreds, if not thousands of people that are involved with the Stampede that work so hard throughout the year to provide that event for tourists and locals, both. And it's great to see so many out enjoying it and supporting them.
Yeah, and Yeah, lots of kids, that's their main summer job. A couple of weeks of just getting out there, the 10 days or whatever, just working like crazy on the grounds. And
Yeah.
And again, Stampede, it's a little different. Scooter mentioned at the end of that, I guess, his next event's going to be K-Days in Edmonton. Used to be Klondike Days for those of us who remember. But it's a little different in Edmonton. Edmonton, it's a big fair and everything else, but Stampede's kind of unique. The whole city sort of gets on board with it. It's just, people listen to me bitch about things for an hour and a half. This is something positive.
People truly come from all around the world. I mean, they see it, they know about it, the greatest outdoor show on earth, the Calgary Stampede. They're interested in the Western way of life. One of our recent leadership candidates in the Maverick Party leadership race was a young fella from Dubai, of all places, the United Arab Emirates, who immigrated here because of the reaction he had to the Calgary Stampede a decade or so ago. So, I mean, it just goes to show you it's worldwide.
Yeah, no, it really gets into people's blood sometimes. So getting worldwide, you wanted to speak on some of those world issues while we still got you here. We've got a crazy world on the go right now.
Exactly. We've got the farmer protest about the dramatic increase in the price and cost of fertilizer and what the government's trying to impose upon them in Holland, in the Netherlands. We've got what we saw on the news recently about the mass protests in Sri Lanka that forced the resignation of the president. It's really, I think this whole business, this ridiculous worldwide addressing of supposed climate change is coming home to roost, because there is a line there. Yes, we all want to be environmentally conscious and do what we can to protect our environment. Always have, always will. But this business of where they're going to force people off the land, they're going to dramatically impact the production of food. And we already know the world, because of our population, our growth in population, all we got to do is have a bad famine, and you're going to have a lot of people that aren't just suffering or struggling to pay the food that goes on the table like we are in Canada, but much more than that, Cory. And so we're seeing this growth of worldwide protests.
Well, the world's tense. We've had 2 unprecedented years of basically every developed nation contracting economically, stepping on the rights of individuals. People can argue whether it was justified or not, but we were locked up. I saw some clown on there saying there was never even a lockdown. People shouldn't even use that term. Come on. When you're forced out of your business, when you're forced to shut down, when you're fined for going out in groups of more than a couple of people, man, this is a crazy thing. And now the price is coming. I mean, people are upset. They're prickly. I think they've lost a lot of trust in the States, not just Canada, as you're saying, everywhere. Yeah. And these governments can't push the envelope the way they used to. People are ready to push back. And I ranted about that with the Dutch. And again, the mainstream media, boy, they're silent on this.
Yeah.
But the Dutch, you don't think of them standing up that much. Well, they're ticked off. They've had it. At least the farmers have. And
well, and you see those photographs so reminiscent of what started last January in Canada with the truckers' protest. Over there, it's the farmers, because they know with what the government of Holland has said, many of them will lose their farms. And those that struggle to survive aren't going to be making sufficient because they can't grow enough without fertilizer. And we've got a growing problem in Canada. I was talking to my brother the other day who farms up in the Peace Country, and he was saying that the cost of fertilizer has gone up unbelievably in Canada. And it was already high before last fall when he was out anhydrous for this year's crop. And so we're not far behind, folks. And when it affects the farmers and their ability to properly fertilize and feed their crop, it's going to affect how many bushels they get, what their long-time financial viability will be, and ultimately how many loaves of bread that can be produced.
Yeah, and we've got this ideologically blinded government. So we saw that with Freeland the other day when talking about the energy prices, and she comes out and says, this is the reason we have to move even further towards electric. No, you fool. You really are clueless. And I tell you what, and I've said this for years, and we're seeing it now, the environment doesn't mean a damn thing if you can't fill your fridge and you can't pay your rent. It doesn't matter how ideological or how concerned a person was about the fluffy bunnies and the temperature 20 years from now. If they can't feed their family or pay for the roof over their head, they're going to rebel. Yeah. And this government doesn't get it yet. But some governments are starting to get it pretty quickly now.
Yeah. And you know, one of the things that's so frustrating, and I think even more so for someone yourself that's on air, ranting day after day, trying to draw people's attention to this. We get some great comments, but they're just a handful of people that are paying attention. The masses are either tuned out, or they're ambivalent, or they apparently just don't care what is coming at us. And it is so frustrating, and it's so annoying for those of us that are involved in trying to message this. And for those people out there, Cory, that say, well, what can I do about it? You know, I was, again, doing a bit of research, and I reflected back on the 1980s, and a fella in Poland, his name was, well, he's still around, Lech Walesa. And he led a movement called the Solidarity Movement. It started out in the Gdansk shipyards as a strike against the communist government of Poland. They wanted democracy. And, you know, it just grew and grew and grew. And they finally forced that government's resignation. And arguably, they played a key role in the Iron Curtain being destroyed and ultimately the breakup of the Soviet Union. So when people think, well, you know, there's nothing that we can do, you know, I point to things like that in history where people have had the courage to stand up and be counted, and some amazing things happen. And I think we're starting to see that similar with this farmer protest, even with our own arguably freedom convoy back in the winter. People are reaching a breaking point, and they're saying government just doesn't listen. These politicians are saying exactly what we want to hear, and then they get elected or re-elected, and the next thing you know, it's the same old, it's the status quo. 2 leadership races now for Conservatives that Albertans support Conservatives, and both provincially and federally. And what are those candidates saying, with the exception perhaps of Danielle and Pierre Poilievre at the federal level? Will they walk the walk if they win?
Yeah, well, and I it's always a hard one to believe. We get frustrated a lot. I believe that was a lot of Jason Kenney's downfall. Again, he promised big and he delivered low, and people wouldn't put up with that. I got a feeling, at least in Alberta, they're going to know, whoever wins is going to know better. Like, they're not going to stay in that leadership if they don't follow through on at least some of their platform, depending on, unless it's one of the Liberal.
The frustrating thing for me, though, at the federal level, and why I've been saying for the last 2 years since I got involved in launching Maverick, is that I'm a slow learner, is because, okay, everybody jumps Pierre Poilievre. Okay, he's saying all the right things, especially for Western Canada, especially for Alberta. And hopefully he'll do it if he becomes prime minister. I'm not convinced, even if he wins the leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada, that he can win the government. And he has to have a majority. Remember, I was there in 2 Harper minorities, and how hard it is to get anything done in a minority situation, a Conservative minority. If you're a Liberal, of course, you just get the NDP to support you, and away you go. Just the same as if you had a majority. But for the Conservatives, will he, as I say, walk the walk? Can he win a majority by sticking to this type of a platform? Is it going to sell in Central Canada? And then most importantly, folks, what happens the next time? We've been going through this cycle for 100 years now, or more than 100 years. And sooner or later, Central and Eastern Canada will say, well, I don't really like what Pierre Poilievre as our prime minister, just as they did with Stephen Harper. I don't really like what he's doing. We're going to vote Liberal again. And then what? We're right back in the same thing. That's why the West has to do something different.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the system has to change. But I mean, there's something I say a lot too, which is a depressing one, but it's truth, is things have to get worse before they get better. And they've been getting progressively worse. They always will bottom out, though. And I think people will realize to a degree the futility of playing within a system that's stacked against you.
Exactly.
But we just have to keep going. It's as I said too. We get people who are cynical. They say, I'll give up, or I won't pay attention. Well,
I'll move. But where are you going to move in the world that's any damn better?
Yeah.
That's the problem, folks. We got to change it here to make it better, so people want to move here.
Well, that's it. So trying and losing is still better than throwing up your hands and guaranteeing a loss.
Yeah.
We just got to keep at it. It's as frustrating as it is. This is a term we use a lot right now.
Well, what I would like to see, I think, and you yourself, Cory, is that people in both leadership races for the Conservatives, for Alberta's information, that they would be asked and commit to a timeline, okay? Like Danielle Smith says that one of her first things will be to bring forward this Sovereignty Act, I think it's called. And great, okay. What follows that? What specific laws, federal laws, have you identified, Danielle, that you will commit to not adhering to? You don't need to repeal them. You can't do that. They're federal laws, but you can commit to not implementing them here in Alberta. How quickly will you move on an Alberta pension plan? I mean, people want to know that. And as you say, that was the problem with Jason. He talked all these lines about the Fair Deal Panel recommendations, right? And then he got in there, nothing's happened. Nothing has happened in that regard, other than that referendum that really didn't prove anything. We already knew that what the result was going to be, that Albertans are saying no to equalization as it's formulated currently.
And yeah,
Didn't tell us anything.
And he gave us a chief firearms officer. Okay, good.
Yeah.
But the pension plan, the RCP, come on, enough. How many times have you got to get yes on the ground before you say, okay, we're going to do it? Quit meddling around and kicking the can down the road.
So I hope in those two leadership races that especially the front runners are forced to commit to a timeline so that people, as they did with Jason, can hold them accountable ultimately.
Yeah, well, we'll see. It's going to be a long summer of politics. And well, thank you for coming in to talk to us today. I'll kind of wrap up the show here, guys. Always lots to cover. We've solved a couple of the world's problems, I think, today. But
well, hopefully we've at least, again, reinforced in your viewers' minds the need to take some action. A good friend of mine, Preston Manning, always says, well, okay, that's fine to talk about it, Cory, but people need to do something.
Yeah. Well, and I think in the wise words of a guy who's not typically called wise, I think it was Mike Tyson who he said, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. So all the fluffy plans and environmentalism, and everything, that's fine, but you're about to get punched in the face. So you're going to have to reevaluate your plan in a hurry. And I think that'll mean a lot of people, though, perhaps standing up, even if late. It's better late than never.
Yep.
And we'll get some changes yet. All right. So that was Jay Hill, the longtime member of Parliament, Reform member, Conservative Alliance Party, a whole number of incarnations, and then founder of the Maverick Party, now political statesman and regular show guest.
It's been a pleasure, as always.
Great, thanks. And for you guys, I will see you all tomorrow. I'll make sure to try a couple of those remedies for that bloody cough that's nagging me, the main one of which is not eating a bunch of peanuts before the show and remembering to bring my water glass in with me. So thanks again. And I'm going to have Paul Hinman on tomorrow because speaking of political turmoil, boy, he's got a hornet's nest on his hands and some other guests in political chat as well. So see you tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. sharp.